Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, I've got a review for you of Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. So this is a book that was kind of on my radar. I'd heard a few people talk positively about it. A few people say it was very disturbing and quite troubling. And it sounded like a book, I thought I would probably get to at some point, but I wasn't actively pursuing a copy of it. And then I happened to be in a bookshop in Brighton, kind of just wandering around, feeling like I had a few spare quid in my pocket, and chanced across a signed copy of it. So I picked it up and have now read it, and I'm really glad that I bought it. It's a really interesting, very modern feeling horror novel, and different from a lot of horror novels I've read recently, in that it manages to combine a really strong horror story with a really strong kind of political message as well, and it does that, I thought, very, very effectively. So let me tell you what it's about. So it's about two women, one trans woman who's the main character and one cis woman who were friends and who've gone through a really traumatic event in what is effectively a haunted house. And that haunted house, feels like a character in a book, and it's a truly awful place. I've never known a place so effectively described. It really does feel like a living character within the book, and it's fantastically grim and disturbing and effective. So they've gone through this traumatic event. They were friends and they've kind of gone their separate ways following that, and it starts with the trans woman kind of living her life and trying to adjust to to cope with the trauma that she's gone through. And there's a wonderfully effective thing that the author uses where she has this poster of an unnamed pop singer who is clearly supposed to be Morrissey from the Smiths on her wall, that becomes in itself a monster. And I really love the idea of Morrissey as a literal monster, given what we've come to learn about his politics over the last few years. So anyway, this traumatic event has happened to split these two friends up, and as I've said, one of the main character is trans, the other woman is cis, and what happens thereafter is woven into this book is a really interesting discussion of that ongoing debate that seems to be like gripping and polarizing society at the moment, of the rights of cis women versus the rights of trans women. That's absolutely central to this book, as you might expect it to be in a book, a modern book by a trans author, and I think it's really, really well handled. There is it doesn't feel too polemical. It feels as even-handed as it might be, but it still is incredibly powerful and interesting. So I thought I thought that debate was very well handled in the book, and importantly, doesn't get in the way of the story. So you still get a really gripping and interesting and disturbing horror story, as well as this kind of more political discussion. The setting is Brighton, which is a town I know very well, or a city I know very well. I live not far from it, and used to live in Brighton, and it really captures the feel, the vibe of Brighton effectively, and in particular I felt like it captured that kind of slight aimlessness that many of us feel as people in our 20s. I'm not saying I'm in my 20s now, clearly, but I felt this when I was in my 20s, where you're no longer a child. You've grown up. You have to be an adult now, but you don't really know what you're doing. So it really captures well that time of life. And as someone who was a 20-something in Brighton, maybe it spoke to me a bit more because of that. But it's also very much about trauma and the ongoing impacts of trauma on people's lives. And there is, as I say, there's some very disturbing stuff in this book. It's definitely a book that's worth checking out trigger warnings for before you read it. But it is, sensitively and effectively written. It never feels exploitative. It always feels like it's written with its heart in the right place, and you feel like the author really cares about the characters. In particular the central character, but also the other woman who's part of the story. You can see how she has ended up in the place that she is in, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's one of those books that combines horror and politics and kind of discussion of society generally. And it reminded me a lot of the work of the filmmaker David Cronenberg, who is actually referenced in the book. So I think that may be a deliberate thing. But Cronenberg is one of those authors who makes really in your face graphic horror movies that also examine, the role of, media in society, the role of medicine in society, and things like that. And I think Alison Rumfitt does, something similar in this book by talking about, the current political debate that I've talked about, and combining that with a really, really effective horror story. And the monstrous house at the heart of this story is kind of an embodiment of bigotry, really. And you see, parts of the story, you see, previous times and previous impacts the house has had on other people's lives. And it's just, it really swept me up. It's really swept me up as a story. It carried me along. I really cared about the characters, but that central message is really, really effectively done as well. Like I say, it never gets in the way of the story, but it's there all the way through the book, and to manage to juggle those two things effectively, I think is a definite skill. So Alison Rumfitt is an author I will be looking out for. I know she's got a new book that's just come out, which I forget the title of now, but I will definitely be getting a copy of that. So yeah, if you like your horror a bit more political than normal, and you're not afraid to read stuff that's that definitely edges into the sphere of the disturbing, then I would definitely recommend Tell Me I'm Worthless. So I hope you found that interesting. Do let me know if you've read Tell Me I'm Worthless and what you thought of it. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.